There's a good chance that, right now, you can recall an extremely embarrassing moment from your life. Maybe it was something you said. Maybe it was a presentation that went terribly wrong. A message sent to the wrong person. A joke that nobody found funny. Or just a small mistake that happened years ago. What's strange is that, even after all this time, the memory can still trigger an immediate reaction. A feeling of discomfort. A sudden wave of embarrassment. Sometimes even a desire to disappear for a few seconds. But why? Why does the brain seem incapable of letting go of certain embarrassing moments? After all, thousands of other experiences have faded from memory. Ordinary conversations have been forgotten. Entire days have vanished from your recollection. People who once crossed your path have disappeared completely from your mind. But that embarrassing moment is still there, as if it happened yesterday. Most people believe this happens because the brain likes to punish us for our mistakes. But that explanation is wrong. In reality, there is a much deeper reason. A reason connected to survival, the fear of rejection, and the human need to belong. And the most surprising part is that your brain may be treating that small embarrassment as something far more important than it actually was. To understand why these memories refuse to disappear, we first need to understand why shame is one of the most powerful emotions a human being can experience. If you touch a hot surface, you feel pain immediately. Physical pain serves a clear purpose: protecting the body. It alerts you when something poses a threat. But there is another kind of pain that the brain also takes very seriously: social pain. For most of human history, surviving alone was extremely difficult. Our ancestors depended on the group for food, protection, and support. Acceptance meant safety. Rejection meant danger. That is why the brain developed mechanisms to constantly monitor our social standing. And this is exactly where shame comes in. When we do something that could lead to ridicule, humiliation, or rejection, the mind interprets the event as a potential threat to belonging. In other words, the brain does not see only an embarrassing moment. It sees a social risk. That is why tripping in front of dozens of people feels much worse than tripping alone at home. The mistake may be the same, but the social consequences are completely different. What is most fascinating is that, in most modern situations, those consequences barely exist. No one loses the protection of the group for telling a bad joke. No one is expelled from society for making an awkward mistake during a meeting. Yet the brain still reacts using very ancient emotional programs. Programs designed for a world in which the opinion of the group could determine who thrived and who was left behind. And this intense emotional reaction has an unexpected effect. It turns certain moments into memories that are extremely difficult to forget. Because, to the brain, the event seems far too important to ignore. But that still does not explain why the same scene keeps returning to your mind, sometimes for years. If shame were merely a passing emotion, embarrassing moments would fade away with time. But often, the opposite happens. Years later, a memory appears out of nowhere. You are taking a shower, driving, trying to fall asleep, and suddenly, that scene returns with remarkable clarity, as if the brain had pressed the replay button. This happens because emotionally intense memories receive special treatment. When an experience triggers shame, fear, anxiety, or embarrassment, the brain interprets the event as something relevant to the future. Instead of simply filing it away, it marks it as an important lesson. The logic behind this is simple. If a situation caused social distress once, it may be best not to repeat it. So the mind keeps revisiting the event, not to punish you, but to learn from it. The problem is that this system does not always know when to stop. Sometimes the lesson was learned long ago. The situation will never happen again. The people involved have moved on with their lives. Yet the brain continues to treat that memory as a high priority file. And there is an even more curious detail. The more emotionally you react to the memory, the stronger it becomes. Every time you relive the scene with shame, regret, or discomfort, the brain receives a message. This is still important. And that is why the memory keeps returning. But perhaps the most unfair part of all is this. While you are reliving that moment for the 100th time, there is a very good chance that nobody else remembers it. And that is the next piece of the puzzle. Think of an embarrassing moment that still bothers you. Now ask yourself a simple question. How many people actually remember that event today? The answer is probably far fewer than you imagine. There is a psychological phenomenon known as the spotlight effect. It describes our tendency to overestimate how much attention other people pay to us. In practice, we behave as if we are standing at the center of a brightly lit stage, while everyone watches every detail of our mistakes, flaws, and embarrassing moments. But reality is usually very different. Most people are far too busy thinking about themselves. They are concerned with their own problems, their own mistakes, their own insecurities. While you are replaying an embarrassing presentation from 5 years ago, someone else is doing exactly the same thing with a mistake they made last week. It is almost as if every person is the protagonist of their own story. And because of that, other people's mistakes occupy far less space in memory than we imagine. This explains a curious situation. You may remember with perfect clarity something embarrassing that you did years ago, yet struggle to recall similar moments committed by other people. Not because your mistakes were bigger, but because the brain gives priority to what affects you directly. Even so, understanding this rationally does not make the embarrassment disappear immediately, because there is a huge difference between knowing something and feeling something. And that is precisely why your brain continues to hold on to these memories while the rest of the world seems to have moved on. Imagine that 10 people witness exactly the same event. Each of them will walk away with a different memory. That is because the brain does not record reality like a camera. It selects information, filters details, and prioritizes what it considers most important for each individual. For you, that embarrassing moment was tied to your reputation, your self-esteem, and your fear of being judged. For everyone else, it was simply one event among hundreds that happened that day. That is why there is such a huge difference between the way you remember the event and the way others see it. The brain is constantly asking, what does this mean for me? Not, what does this mean for everyone else? This difference creates an interesting distortion. You may spend years carrying a memory that feels enormous. Meanwhile, the people who were present may not even be able to remember what happened. Some may have forgotten it the very same day. Others may never have considered it important in the first place. But for you, the memory remained alive because it was connected to strong emotions. And strong emotions act like markers. They tell the brain, save this. It might be useful later. But there is a paradox. The mechanism created to protect you can end up prolonging a form of suffering that has already outlived its usefulness. And that is the final revelation behind the most embarrassing moments of your life. Your brain does not hold on to the most embarrassing moments of your life because it wants to make you suffer. It holds on to them because it believes it is helping you. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. If a situation led to rejection, humiliation, or social risk, remembering it could help prevent the same mistake from happening again. For thousands of years, this strategy increased the chances of survival. The problem is that the modern brain still relies on mechanisms that were developed for a very different world. A world of small groups where reputation could directly influence access to resources, alliances, and protection. Today, an awkward mistake in a meeting, a poor presentation, or an embarrassing social interaction rarely carries consequences that severe. Yet the mind continues to react as if it does. That is why those moments remain vivid for so long. They combine three powerful ingredients: the pain of possible rejection, the emotional intensity of shame, and the brain's constant attempt to learn from its own mistakes. But there is something liberating about understanding all of this. Most people are not analyzing your mistakes. They are not replaying your awkward moments. They are not thinking about that embarrassing incident you still carry with you. They are far too busy dealing with their own. In the end, the memory that feels so important to you may be nothing more than a forgotten event to everyone else. And perhaps that is the greatest irony of all. The moments that embarrass us the most usually occupy far more space in our own minds than they do in the minds of anyone else. So the next time an embarrassing memory suddenly resurfaces, it may be worth asking a simple question. Does this moment still matter to anyone else, or only to my brain?